Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back from another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Sweet and Sour. Sweet and Sour is a Korean romance that's part drama and part comedy, and tells the story of a man named Lee Jong-hyuk, a man who's in a romantic relationship with a woman named Jung Dae-yoon. We see Hyuk first meet Dae-yoon whenever he's hospitalized for jaundice and a variety of other medical illnesses that he has at the beginning of the movie, and he happens to be placed in the same hospital as where Dae-yoon works at as a nurse. Hyuk quickly falls in love with Dae-yoon and tries and fails multiple times to win her heart over. She's only interested in a platonic relationship with him at first, at the beginning of the movie, but eventually he does win her heart over, and the two do become a couple. After a brief period of time together, the movie flash forwards a bit in the future, and we see everything is going well for Hyuk. He's lost a lot of weight, he's doing well at his job, he's moved in with Dae-yoon, and they're clearly in love with each other. Everything is going awesome for Hyuk. Eventually, however, he's given the opportunity to take part in a temporary work placement that pays a lot better than his current job, but is located further away from where he lives with Dae-yoon. Hyuk ends up accepting the job to Dae-yoon's dismay, and their relationship slowly but surely starts to degrade over the course of the movie, as the ongoing distance between the two serves as a central conflict to the story. What I liked the most about this movie was how realistic and relatable the characters were. They almost felt like people that I knew in real life. I found Hyuk to be a very interesting character in this movie. If there was one word I could use to describe him and his personality and overall motivations in the story, it would be dedicated. He starts off in the movie by being dedicated to Dae-yoon and maintaining the happiness in the relationship together, and he's not really all that focused on succeeding in his work life. But as he becomes more immersed in his new job, he finds that he's unable to leave as early as he would like, but not wanting to make a bad impression on his boss, he decides that he's going to persevere and fully dedicate himself to his work, which puts a strain on his relationship with Dae-yoon. His motivations for wanting to continue working in his new job are believable and understandable, in that he just wants to maintain a healthy financial future with his girlfriend. At the same time, however, you can't help but feel bad for the rift that develops between him and Dae-yoon over the course of the movie. This leads me to talk about Dae-yoon, who I also thought was a very interesting and well-rounded character, and I found her to be very similar to Hyuk in more ways than one. Like with Hyuk, she works long hours and late night shifts at her job, this time as a nurse at her local hospital, and like Hyuk again, she finds herself becoming more interested and focused on events happening in her workplace as the distance between the two characters grows. It's a really tragic situation of a relationship, because you can tell the two characters genuinely love each other, yet they end up becoming strangers to each other as life circumstances slowly but surely rip them apart. Han Bo-young, who is Hyuk's co-worker in the movie, is another character that adds a lot of complexity and depth to the situation between the two. As with Hyuk, she too is also dedicated to the job, but unlike him, she is not in a romantic relationship, so she doesn't have any ongoing attachments outside of her work life. And I love how Bo-young tries to outdo Hyuk in this sense, like she knows that she's better at the job, and she's always trying to one-up him early on in the movie, which leads to the two developing a rivalry of sorts that ends up becoming slowly platonic over the course of the movie. There's an interesting parallel going on in that Hyuk is drifting further away from Dae-yoon and becoming closer to Bo-young as they spend more time with each other on the job, and I just loved seeing how that all played out on camera. There's a similar situation between Dae-yoon and someone else at the hospital that she works at, but saying anything more about it would be spoiling it. And I know I already talked about realism in terms of how the characters are portrayed, but it bears repeating that this movie is extremely realistic when it comes to how the whole story is presented, all while being interjected with satirical and scathing bits of humor. The movie is a great critique in demonstrating how Asian companies, Korean ones in this case, pride their employees in working long hours at the expense of their physical and mental health. There are many scenes featured in this movie that reflect the toll that this kind of attitude takes on company workers, ranging from long commutes to work to obligatory company dinners. And I truly felt sorry for all the characters in this movie and all the crap that they had to put up with. Not just the main characters, but the side characters too, all the way down to the guys that Hyuk is parked between whenever he's on his way to work, as they're constantly drifting off and practically falling asleep at the wheel. Watching characters working long days at work could get tiring and boring, but thanks to this movie's rapid editing style, it never stays in a scene for more than 2 to 3 minutes at a time, and it manages to stay fresh every time it returns to a setting. It also helps that this movie's enjoyability is enhanced by the fact that it is very, very funny. Definitely one of the funniest movies I have watched this year. There are underlying satirical elements in this movie's story that you can have a good laugh at the time and appreciate later, but I find this movie's humor really excels at the sheer randomness at some of the situations that these characters find themselves in. Hyuk by far has the most memorable scenes in this regard. The best scene that I can recall is whenever he manages to find Dae-yoon's phone number after he's discharged from the hospital. Hyuk apologizes for calling out of the blue like this, but she's not really fazed by his call that much. In fact, she ends up inviting him to come visit over at her place, and he reacts in the most over-the-top fashion ever. He is panicking, trying to steal his parents' car keys away from them, and the whole drive over to her place, he's just screaming like, "Ah!" That whole series of events only lasts a few seconds, but it made the movie for me. Another great moment, or series of moments rather, is the unpleasant interactions that Hyuk has with the older nurse at the hospital that he's staying in because he would rather be saying Dae-yoon. Every time Hyuk did something that raised her ire, she always responded with a disapproving "huh," which is hilarious at first, but then he starts to give her a taste of her own medicine a few times, and then he starts to respond back with his own version of a "huh," and I'm just laughing thinking about it. I loved it. The humor in this movie was fantastic. There weren't any real major problems I had with this movie's story, but there were a few issues that did come up that left me scratching my head a couple times. There's a big plot point revealed between Hyuk and Dae-yoon about halfway through the movie, and it has a great setup, and there's one or two other scenes in the movie that build up towards something big, but the payoff just isn't there. I was kind of shocked that this movie ignored this really big plot point toward the end of the movie and just wasn't brought up at all. It had the potential to create some big drama and result in a huge conflict between Dae-yoon and Hyuk towards the end, but for whatever reason it was never brought up. Another problem that I have with this movie concerns its ending and how it completely turns the movie over on its head. Now, I do like the ending for the most part, but I still found myself very confused and bewildered by the whole thing. Without getting too much into spoiler territory, there's an interaction between the main characters where everything comes to a head, understandably so because it is the end of the movie and there has to be some sort of resolution in place. There's a lot of little scenes recalled from earlier on in the movie that give clues as to how the ending is portrayed, and most of it makes sense except for the way that Lee Jong-hyuk is portrayed as a character. I still don't really understand what the filmmakers were going for. Overall though, Sweet and Sour is a fun romance movie that has a serious message about Korean work culture that can be applied to pretty much every country in the world. If you want to watch a romance that balances equal parts of comedy and drama, you definitely gotta check out this movie. Its story can be confusing at times, but it still remains a lot of fun to watch, and its relatable worldview on work culture is something that I think we've all experienced at one point or another in our lives. Anyways guys, that's gonna wrap up my review of Sweet and Sour. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the American sci-fi Awake. Bye bye!